Good morning and welcome to the launching of Passage to Asian and International Students Seminar in International Course on Creative Media 2022 and also the International Webinar on Pandemic and Social Cultural Change. To the Honorable Chair of P2A Ice Cream 2022, Dr. Luthfi as the invited speakers, lecturers from University Utara Malaysia, lecturers from Suwanusit University, lecturers from Universitas Islam Indonesia, all of the participants, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. Okay, I think we are going to go to the main agenda of this event, which is the webinar. But before that, we would like to encourage you all to turn on the camera because we would like to have the photo session all together. Okay, maybe for all of the participants, you can turn on your camera and our team here will help to count. Okay, our team already?
First of all is photo session, okay.
Yes. Okay, may we start? On the count of 2, 1. Okay, on the count of 3, 2, 1. Okay, once again, on the count of 3, 2, 1. Okay, thank you. I think that's all. Okay, now let's move to the next agenda, which is the webinar that will be carried out by Dr. Luthfi. And on this webinar will be led by Mr. Anugrah Pambudi. Mr. Anugrah Pambudi is the administrator and also manages some of the communications journals, such as the Asian Journal of Media and Communications, the UEE Communication Journal, and also Chantric Communication Student Journal. So without further ado, I would like to give this time to Mr. Anugrah Pambudi. The time and spoon is yours, Mr. Pambudi. Thank you.
Thank you, Miss Jenny. Miss Anissa Putri Jenny, thank you for the occasion. First of all, Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Good morning, everyone. Please have a nice seat and enjoy this webinar. First of all, I want to thank you for all of you for preparing yourself. Host, Miss Jenny, for letting me being the moderator of this webinar. I'm Pambudi Wicaksono. You can call me Pam Pam. It's short name. I will be the moderator of this first online session of P2I Ice Cream 2022. And I'm very pleased to see you here and welcome. We all know that we have been facing the coronavirus pandemic for more than 2 years. In this session, we will try to track what changes are happening in the current pandemic. Also, from Mr. Luthfi Adam, we will look to the past to understand become the engine of social change, including understand what and how the pandemic will affect the future change. To answer these important questions, we are very pleased here. We have Mr. Luthfi Adam here who will share with us about this. Before Mr. Luthfi Adam share his thought and finding, I would like to introduce Mr. Adam. First, Luthfi Adam. He is a PhD Northwestern University, is a research fellow at the Institute of Advanced Research at Monash, Indonesia. Monash, Indonesia, ya Mas. Luthfi also a fellow in Garden and Landscape Studies at Dumbarton Oaks, Harvard University during the 2022 and 2023 academic year. Before joining Monash Indonesia, Luthfi was an EDGS research fellow at Buffett Institute for Global Affairs, Northwestern University, USA. He also gets some award, for example, Harold Perkin Prize for the best dissertation in 2020 from the Department of History at Northwestern University. He also got his PhD and master degree at Northwestern University, and he also graduated and get master degree too in Culture and Media Studies, UGM, and also currently Mr. Adam is also convener of Southeast Asian Frontiers workshop series that the first time this year is Highland. It's held by UII, Universitas Islam Indonesia, which is Department of Communication is the host, and RSRE as the host too. In this occasion, Mr. Luthfi Adam will deliver a presentation under the title Pandemic and Sociocultural Change, a Historical Perspective. Before the presentation begins, let me inform how the presentation will be going on. First, Mr. Luthfi Adam, our speaker, will be invited to present the material. The speaker will be given an hour or 60 minutes, Mbak Ida, to present.
Yes.
Please make a note, hold your question, don't go anywhere. Don't worry, we will take it after the presentation. There will be a question and answer and followed out by conclusion. Now, allow me to welcome Mr. Luthfi Adam, PhD, to deliver his presentation. Mas Luthfi Adam, please, the time is yours and the committee will help you. Mbak Desya or Mbak Kika, can you share the screen?
All right, thank you, Mas Pam Pam. Thank you, Miss Gianni, and the Mas Herman. I saw also Mas Duki. So good morning, everyone. Thank you very much, UII or UII, Universitas Islam Indonesia. Such an honor for me to deliver a talk in this urgent and pressing topic. And I also would say it's challenging for me because I am a historian. Well, I used to study communication, and I also used to give some like one semester lecture in Universitas Islam Indonesia back then in 2008. I think I forgot one semester or 2 semesters, right? So I used to be a part of Universitas Islam Indonesia for like 1 year. So I'm happy to reconnect with UII because I also I've been working with some scholars at UII developing a workshop on frontier studies. So I see UII has this, like very productive and progressive kind of activities and agenda, and I'm very happy to always be connected with UII activities, including today. If anyone can help me with sharing my presentation slide. If not, I can also share through my own device. That's fine. Okay, good. Thank you. So yeah, why this is challenging for me to deliver this presentation? Because I switched from being a communication scholar into a scholar in history, and my main research topic is colonial history, right? I hope you can understand why I tried in today's presentation, why I try to kind of draw you back to the past, because I'm a historian. I always think that everything in the past is important, and in order to understand the current situation and even the future, we need to look back to the past and learn from the past, right? So yes, what I'd like to discuss with you today is pandemics and socio-cultural changes from a historical perspective, right? So I really hope you can follow my presentation, but I'm also will apologize to you if my presentation doesn't really make sense to you. I understand that today we have like a multidisciplinary group here, from communication to tourism, if I'm not mistaken, to international politics. So yeah, I just hope that my presentation makes sense, and let's discuss later. Keep your questions right now with you. So yeah, so today's event, or the events that you are now having, as I understood it, concerns with social and cultural changes as induced or catalyzed by the pandemic, right? So I will begin with the big question. Can you help me change the slide, please? So I will begin with this big question. Why and how pandemics catalyzes social changes, right? And since I am a historian, I don't only ask this question to address our current pandemic situation, but also the pandemics throughout the human history. What can we learn from our history about the relationship between pandemics or disease outbreaks and social changes? So in answering this question, I would suggest or I try to help myself, and I would suggest also to you to answer this question by considering or connecting the pandemics with other major sources of social changes, which are population change, like the growth on decline of population, the cultural and technological innovation, the cultural lag, and the change in natural environment and social conflicts. So as you can see on the screen, I try to kind of, pose an argument, right? So I will argue that pandemics catalyzes cultural changes and technological innovation, and also pandemic catalyzes social conflicts and the change in social systems. And then pandemics itself could be understood as a natural or biological disruptions or disturbance over human civilization or the development that human try to make, right? So why I thought that I have this thought that pandemics catalyzes social changes. Next slide, please. So I follow the suggestion of historian Walter Skadel from Stanford University in his book, The Great Labor Violence and History of Inequality from the Stone Age to the 20th to the Stone Age to the 21st century, who said that pandemics have been powerful change makers. Disease outbreaks right now and in the past disrupted existing social system, opening up, opportunity for social transformation. So yeah, as we can experience during our pandemic times, we experience drastic change in the way we interact in our daily lives. We are adapting to a new way of communicating, socializing, and working. And we develop a new culture, the culture mediated by online digital technologies. But before going to the discussing our current social change that we are now experiencing, let me guide you to the history of how the history of pandemic as recorded by historians. Next slide, please. So this is, I will just give you the highlights of, the pandemics throughout the times. So first in 430 BC in Athens, this is the earliest recorded pandemic happening during the Peloponnesian War, a war between the Athens and Sparta. So we can find a lot of movies about this, right? The Sparta and Athens war. Sparta won the war, by the way, and so after the disease, after the disease happened in Athens and passed through Libya, Ethiopia, and Egypt, and as much as 2/3 of the population in these cities died. And then the Antonine plague, which was possibly an early appearance of smallpox or cacar in bahasa Indonesia that began with the Hun. The Hun that infected the Germans. The German passed it to the Romans, and then spread throughout the Roman Empire. The symptom included fever, sore throat, diarrhea, and if the patient live long enough, also they will have like sores throughout his body. And so yeah, that's the Antonine plague. And then the Cyprian plague, you know, the similar symptoms like diarrhea, vomiting, but also fever, but they have like throat ulcers, and possibly starting in Ethiopia, passing through the North Africa into Rome, and then into Egypt. Next slide, please. Justinian plague, first appearing in Egypt, and then go through Palestine and Byzantine Empire. The plague changed the course of the empire. You know, sometimes a plague like this can change the political circumstances. And in this case, the plague helped the Emperor Justinian's plans to bring Roman Empire back together, causing massive struggle. So there was like war, you know, throughout the spread of the diseases. And it is also credited with creating apocalyptic atmosphere that spurred the rapid spread of Christianity. You know, so because of the diseases outbreak, you know, Christianity, one of the largest religion in the world, can be spread throughout the globe. 50 million people, 26% of the world population died. And then this is one of the important disease outbreaks, which is the leprosy in the 11th century. And leprosy grew into pandemic in Europe in the Middle Ages, resulting in the building of numerous leprosy-focused hospitals to accommodate the vast number of victims. So leprosy was also believed to be a punishment from God that ran in families. This belief led to moral judgments of the victims. So, thousands of people a year can be, you know, killed because there was no antibiotics, right? And later, scientists found out that leprosy was caused by bacterial disease and therefore can be only cured by antibiotics. In 1350, the Black Death. This is also a quite famous pandemic, which was responsible for the death of 1/3 of the world population. So this is the second large outbreak of the bubonic plague, possibly started in Asia and then moved to the West through, you know, the trade route in caravans, entering through Sicily in Italia, and then go through spread out in Europe rapidly. So England and France were so incapacitated by the plague that the countries called a truce to the war. The British feudal system collapsed when the plague changed economic circumstances and demographics. So big changes, right? In 1452, and this is one of the my favorite historical topic, the Colombian Exchange. So following the arrival of the Spanish in the Caribbean, right now is a part of America, diseases such as smallpox, measles, and bubonic plague were passed along the native population by Europeans. Spanish as the discoverer of America. But with no previous exposure, this diseases devastated indigenous people in America, with as many as 90% dying throughout North and South America continents. So, for example, Christopher Columbus encountered the Taino people, and the population was 60,000, And by 1548, the population stood at less than 500. So it's like, drastic population decline. The Aztec Empire was destroyed by this Colombian exchange encounters that brought smallpox. So Aztec Empire was destroyed by smallpox infection or cacar, right? So in total, around 56 million Native Americans were killed in 16th and 17th centuries. Change slide, please. So the next outbreaks or pandemic was the Great Plague of London in 1665. So this is another devastating bubonic plague or pest in Bahasa Indonesia that led to the death of 20% of London's population. As human death tolls mounted and mass graves appeared, hundreds of thousands of cats, dogs were slaughtered because people thought that the disease was spread through the carriers of animals. And the worst of the outbreaks was happened in 1666. And this was around the time as another destructive event in London, which was called the Great Fire of London. And then the first cholera pandemic in 1817. So this is like a long pandemic because no medical doctors or experts know the cause and the cure of this disease. So at first infected in Russia, originated in Russia, where 1 million people died, and then spreading through feces, infected water and food. So the cause of the disease was then found out was the bacterium, and then spread throughout the globe by the activities of colonialism and imperialism. For example, the British soldier brought it to India, and millions of people died. The next pandemic was the third plague pandemic in 1855, killing 15 million people. And then 10 slide, please. In 1875, the disease pandemic outbreaks happened in Fiji, a small island who were colonized by the British. So the arrival of the British kind of brought the measles and killed nearly 40,000 people. So it's similar with the Colombian Exchange kind of phenomenon, right? And then the Russian flu. So this is like the first significant flu pandemic that happened in Siberia and Kazakhstan, and then traveled to Moscow, and then made its way into Finland and then Poland, and then it moved into the rest of Europe. And by the following year, the Russian flu crossed the ocean into North America and Africa. And by 1890, the Russian flu killed 360,000 people throughout the globe. The next one is one of the most famous pandemic, and the pandemic from the past that consistently are discussed in today's situation, in today's COVID-19 pandemic situation, which is the 1918 Spanish flu. So this is a kind of flu, right? Also called the avian-borne flu, that resulted in 50 million people died worldwide. So the first flu was first kind of observed in Europe, but there are some scholars also called that this flu was first originated in the United States, in Kansas, before spreading around the world, right? At that time, there were no effective drugs or vaccines to treat this killer flu strain. So it killed thousands of Americans when it first emerged in the United States, and then spread out throughout the globe. And the Netherlands is in this or colonial Indonesia was one of the place where the deaths by the Spanish flu was kind of one of the largest in the globe. Change slide, please. So we go to the 20th century, and we have the 1957 Asian flu, which started in Hong Kong and then spread out throughout China and then into the United States. The Asian flu became also widespread in England, and killed around 14,000 people. So the second wave of this flu outbreaks causing estimated in total about 1.1 million deaths globally, right? So very devastating. And then the next one is the HIV AIDS pandemics in 1981. So AIDS destroys a person's immune system, resulting in eventual death by diseases that the body would usually fight off. So very deadly. So basically, scholars found out that the virus originated from West Africa, from an encounter between human and chimpanzee in around 1920s, and then the disease would spread through certain body fluids. First moved to Haiti, and then to New York, and then to San Francisco in 1970s. So treatment of HIV AIDS have been slow. 5 million people worldwide have died because of this disease. And then the last one is the SARS pandemic in 2003, which believed to have started from the encounters between human and bats. Probably first originated in China, and then spread out to around 26 other countries, infecting but small number of deaths, only around 674. So let's go to the next topics of discussion. Next slide, please. So what can we learn from these pandemics? As I said earlier, that I will further discuss is why and how pandemics catalyzes social change, right? And I will take two examples of pandemics in our history. First is the Colombian Exchange, and second is the Spanish flu. Or maybe I will rather explain how historians like me try to discuss history of pandemics, and what sort of social, cultural, technological, and political changes being catalyzed by disease outbreaks. So I will go deeper with what I think one of the most important topics in history, which is the Colombian Exchange. And I have said earlier about Colombian Exchange, about how the disease introduced by Europeans, right? Following European discovery, quote unquote discovery of what then they called America continent. So the Spanish explorer in 1492 encounters with American people. If you remember the name Christopus Columbus, the Spanish traveler, the encounter between Christopher Columbus with American people was kind of, you know, a historical moment, because from this encounter, almost nearly the whole population in America, or Native Americans, were killed. And also major empire in North America were also collapsed. But the killers were not Europeans. I mean, yes, there were fights and wars, but the main killers were diseases such as smallpox and measles, and then bubonic plague, who were carried by European bodies and possibly animals to America, and then spread to Native Americans, right? But to be more precise, the term Colombian Exchange was actually a process of exchange of not only diseases, but also many commodities, or, you know, products or organisms between the New World and the Old World. Can you change the slide, please? Here, there's the term New World and Old World, right? And the New World meaning the American continents, or American continents like what we understand today. And American continents, this is like the New World being colonized and then constructed by Europeans. So this is the New World for the Europeans. And the Old World refers to Europe and Asia and Africa, the continents that had a long history of exchange and interactions, including exchanging diseases, right? So in Europe, in Asia, in Africa, the populations in this Old World have been exchanging diseases and have been developing like immunity system. So the smallpox, measles, and bubonic plague were not as deadly anymore. But unlike the people in America, or Native Americans, who were quite isolated from Europe, Asia, and Africa, the Native Americans had not have yet the immunity system to fight the diseases, right? But you know, the kinds of exchanges, and we go this to the discussion about, you know, cultural and technological changes as catalyzed by the pandemic, right? Colombian exchanges were not only exchange of diseases, but also exchange of many things, right? As you can see on the screen, from Europe, European, they sent out, or, you know, introduce pig, sheep, cattle, honeybee, and then they brought coffee, banana, sugarcane, various kinds of grains to be introduced in America. And Europeans, they brought from America so many plants such as tobacco, pumpkin, quinine, squash, yam, avocado, and, you know, and many more. So why this is important? This is important because this exchange is actually the exchange of, you know, culture. So after the Colombian exchange, with this kind of, you know, exchange of plants and cattle, there are, you know, the change in our culinary world, right? For example, for us Southeast Asian, our food base was chili and peanuts, right? And these were introduced to Southeast Asian lands after Europeans brought them from America, because of this Colombian Exchange, because of this pandemic that caused the Europeans to colonize America, and then brought so many plants and products, commodities from America, and introduced them to throughout the globe, right? So and if we think about Mediterranean kind of culinary, we will find that the base of that culinary is tomato, right? Tomato originated from America continent, right? Brought by Europeans, introduced by Europeans, and influencing the Mediterranean culinary. So what I'm trying to explain here is that diseases were also agents of like a huge socio-cultural and political and economic transformation. And what is that? That is colonialism, right? So it is because of the pandemics, because of the death of Native Americans by the diseases brought by Europeans, the age of colonialism or modern colonialism started, right? Because after that, the Spanish, the Portuguese colonized many parts of America, followed by the British, the Dutch, and the French also. So this is like the beginning of the age of colonialism and modern imperialism, right? And because of the colonizing, the successful of Europeans in colonizing America, the colonizing efforts and then expanded to other parts of the globe, to Southeast Asia, right? So that's how Colombian Exchange indirectly influence the lives of Southeast Asia and the lives of our lives today, right? Next slide, please. And then let's take Spanish flu that started in 1918. So why do we need to understand the social change that catalyzed by the Spanish flu? Well, the easy answer is that because we are experiencing the world, the pandemic situation, that there is a kind of continuity of the Spanish flu. So the Spanish flu did not originate in Spain. The first case was reported in Kansas in the USA. It spread so quickly throughout the globe because in 1918 was the time of the World War I in Europe. And so the time of war was always a busy period where mobility of people was incredibly high, right? So the kind of sociocultural change that I wanted to discuss from the Spanish flu case is, first, it was the first time that the non-pharmaceutical intervention, the treatment to prevent the spread of the flu was popularized throughout the globe. So as we can also experience in the current pandemic situation, the quarantine, the self-isolation, the closure of schools and offices were actually at first implemented or become like a public health policy in major cities in the world during the Spanish flu pandemic period, right? So we are still using these methods, non-pharmaceutical intervention, as introduced during the Spanish flu pandemic. Can you change slide, please? So this is like the example of regulations of quarantine during the Spanish flu pandemics, right? So why this is an important social change. Yeah, because then human civilization, people across countries, governments, medical doctors, public health policymakers, then began to kind of develop certain kinds of certain methods of preventing pandemics from spreading, learning from the Spanish flu in 1918. Next slide, please. But the next sociocultural change that gradually developed after the Spanish flu was technological in nature and scientific in nature, which was the discovery of vaccines or flu vaccines, right? So we should note that various pharmaceutical intervention like the medicine to cure flu symptoms and most importantly flu vaccine were actually a new invention. So it was invented like 70 years ago, basically. And the Spanish flu became the catalyst for such a rush in medical research to know the cause of the flu and how to cure it. So at the time of the 1918 pandemic, medical experts actually did not know the cause of the pandemic, the cause of the symptom, the disease. And at the beginning, there were no effective treatments. By the end of the pandemic, experts kind of experimenting with some treatments, such as transfusion of blood from a survivor of the disease into the victims. So they try to kind of experimenting with some cure, right? The research on microorganism and many diseases caused by microorganism had actually started earlier, around the years the 1880s decade. Following, and this was following the advancement in microscope and laboratory facilities. But up to 1918, scientists were not being able to find microorganisms smaller than bacteria. So they have microscope, but the microscope was not good enough to kind of find microorganisms smaller than bacteria, right? So scientists thought that influenza was caused by bacterium called Bacillus influenzae. So they've been experimenting with bacteria, right? So they did not know about the viruses at all. But then, so they experimenting with bacteria and try to isolate and see many types of bacteria under microscope. They also knew that there were, but they also began to kind of feel suspicious that there were disease agents smaller than bacteria, and then they tried to kind of improve the microscope itself and to find virus, which was microorganism smaller, much smaller than bacteria, right? So they found finally, they invented a more advanced microscope, and in the decades following the pandemic in the 1920s and 30s, they began to kind of more understand that the influenza was actually not caused by bacteria but by viruses, right? So they began to kind of experiment with finding vaccine. So the vaccine itself was then invented in the 1940s, and the test was first began by using the U.S. Army, and then the testing for the civilian started in 1945. And then by 1945, around that period, around the end of World War II, then we have flu vaccines, a very important medical discovery that helped the human civilization to kind of survive from the flu, right? But also this is interesting that the research to find flu started in the end of World War I and finished at the end of World War II, right? This is also a very interesting question for historian like me. So from these two examples of pandemic, we learn how diseases catalyzed a change in human history. In the case of the Colombian Exchange, diseases killed nearly the whole Native American population. Diseases gave way for European colonization in America, and then Australia, and then New Zealand, and then to Asia, right? And the success of colonialism triggered European powers to kind of expand their imperial conquest to Africa later on. So meanwhile, in the second case, the Spanish flu, we learn about the change in which society experimented with social engineering, such as quarantine and city lockdown to prevent the spread of flu. We also learn about Spanish flu that catalyzed the advancement of research in medical science, specifically in bacteriology and then virology, to find the cause and the cure to Spanish flu. So these are social engineering and scientific experiment that continue to the present time, right? And will likely to continue in the future, as we likely will live side by side with viruses causing flu or new kind of flu, right? And other types of diseases. So this is the kind of social changes as catalyzed by pandemics. So change slide, please. So let's now go back to our present time, right? So what sort of changes that we experience in COVID-19 pandemic? So besides the large numbers of people dead because of the pandemic, what kind of cultural and technological change following the COVID-19 pandemic? So let's have like a more relaxed conversation, because this is about our situation right now. So since most of the world announced the pandemic situation in the early 2020, one drastic change that we experiencing has been a global restriction for social interaction, right? The pandemic caused by a highly contagious virus that required every one of us to distance ourselves from the others, right? Up to now, in most countries, especially in Southeast Asia, people still have to put on masks and stay away from the others. And then we have to protect ourselves from spreading viruses to the others, right? Pandemic forced us to view that, to view and to treat our family, friends, and colleagues very differently. The global pandemic spread, we have to prevent, and or the pandemic forced us to be suspicious to anyone with no exception. I'm a husband, I have to be suspicious to my wife, right? You're students, and you have to be suspicious to your friends, or even to your best friends. And parents has to be suspicious to their children. We have to be suspicious to each other, right? So change slide, please. So pandemic really forced us to rethink about our existence. We are not merely human being, or we human being are not a special God's creature with the rights to do whatever we want on earth. We human beings are organisms that can harm our own species by only sneezing and coughing, right? We human beings are carriers of diseases, and many of them are deadly diseases, right? Pandemic and the health treatment to it force us to limit our interaction to the level of isolation. So right now, many of schools are still closed, offices are still closed, or they kind of built a kind of hybrid system doing their job done. But education should continue, work should be done, but without the casual and direct interaction. Everything should be done online, virtually. What has been really changed right now, therefore, was the way we human beings do things, from face-to-face direct interaction into virtual interaction. So suddenly, every institution, from private companies, government offices, to family gatherings, being done through the mediation of virtual meeting platforms, right, such as Zoom, Google Meets, and many others. So I would say, and this is like my interpretation, right, of the current pandemic situation, and you guys will have your own assessment or interpretation, and because we are now still experiencing the pandemic, so we are experiencing the social change, but we are also guessing, is this the social change that will transform our future, right? So this is the question that has no answer, I think, and this is just like my assessment of the current pandemic situation. And I would say that we are in the middle of a drastic change in terms of communication practices. Never before that every single human in this world should have an access to a communication tool and mastering a communication platform to make things done. So before the pandemic, preschool students, because of the pandemic, I mean, preschool students have to be familiar, even preschool students, kindergarten students even, have to be familiar with an education mediated by a phone or a laptop or a PC. And this never happened before, that human have access and become active users of communication gadgets in their early phase as a human, right? Like my daughter already actively use a cell phone or smartphone when she was like 4 years old in the beginning of the pandemic. So if the Colombian Exchange created the age of colonization, the Spanish flu created a new global health system in combating disease, we are now experiencing how COVID-19 accelerate what's so-called like a global digital transformation. I don't know you are agree or not. It's very debatable, of course. Change slide, please. So in discussing about technology as one of the aspects of social change, right now, the big word is digital, right? Or digital technology. As the world became closed down due to the restriction and limitation of social contact, and a large portion of the world population relied on digital technology. So in Southeast Asia, since the pandemic began, 60 million Southeast Asians have become digital consumers. People who have used at least one service online, people began to kind of actively use online services, right? From groceries and food delivery to online entertainment and finance. And there are now 350 million digital consumers across Indonesia, Malaysia, the Philippines, Singapore, Thailand, and Vietnam. And our dependence to digital technology to survive in our social and economic lives has been increasing, right? A large proportion of the region's internet users in Southeast Asia who came online recently, increasing from 260 million in 2015 into 440 million today, right? Meaning there are also a drastic increase in the number of digital economy innovation, right? So the latest report from Google with Temasek reported that so they predicted in 2030 that the regional digital economy could reach the onset of 1 trillion by the end of the decade and 360 billion in 2025, right? So this is like a drastic change that we're experiencing, and will, when people predicting it to be, to be more dominated in the future. So it's like the prediction for the future is that there will be an increase in digital and internet economy, right? Shoppers are buying more groceries online and they are not going back, right? For example, and ride-hailing consumer increasing. So this kind of social change are happening and will be happening. That's the prediction, right? Next, please. Slide. Okay, so let's us think about the social impact, or to be frankly, social injustice impact as made possible by the digital transformation in our society. Like shown by the caricature on the slide, one problem we have in our society is that not all children or students have suitable gadgets like smartphones, a laptop, or a PC for helping them to gain proper education. If they do have them, the gadgets, right, there's still a very big challenge for each student to learn effectively, getting education by gadgets as the mediation. What I'm trying to say is that our culture and social interaction, such as in education, is changing drastically. Most our interaction has to be mediated. Most our interaction has to be helped by some sort of technology, right? But communication technology has not been cheap and accessible, right? Therefore, one major social challenge we face at the moment is social inequality caused by digital divide and technological injustice. Change slide, please. So let us move to another space, from educational to the workspace. Right? There have been many research trying to examine the impact of pandemic to the declining numbers of jobs. The International Labor Organization estimates that 60% decline in earnings of the almost 1.6 billion workers in the informal economy in the first month of the crisis. These workers are simply not able to work remotely and face impossible choice of risking life or a livelihood, right? Some countries have adopted measures to put up this essential income while also ensuring adequate hygiene for employers and customers, informal enterprise and workers. But this has been very, very challenging. People lost jobs, a lot of them. But there are also, as many reports have been telling us, and this is like the ending of my presentation, and my presentation will end with a lot of questions basically. Demonstrates how companies begin to accelerate automation. Change slide, please. So automation and technological advancement will impact in the disappearing of jobs and decreasing the needs of human laborers. There will also the change in skill demands by the industry, for example, right? By the employer, by the world of work. There will be a change in skill demands. And the pandemic has been really catalyzed this, the change in skill demands, because big companies, or to even small companies, they're now have been adapting digital technology for doing so many jobs. So then the problem is that how the new skill demands were being adopted by people. In this case, poor people, people who have not, access to accessing new skills as demanded by the future. What is the future? As predicted by so many scholars, the future is the world that is transformed or created or catalyzed by digital transformation, which was catalyzed by the pandemic, right? So this is what I think social changes that are happening right now and are predicted to continue in the future, that we will have this digital transformation, and that digital transformation transforms the way we interact, the way we develop our skills to get good jobs in the future. But this digital technology innovation and advancement have been also a challenge for many of people in the globe, right? The people who are not used to or have access or capital or cash or money, right, to access the skills and or even the gadget to be adaptive with the digital transformation in the future. So this is my take on the social changes that are happening right now. You guys probably will have your own assessment, since this is the situation that are still happening, right? So there's no conclusion on that. So we are free to discuss this, and I'm happy to be a part of the discussion today with you. Thank you. Going back to Mas Pampam.
Thank you, Mas Luthfi Adam, for sharing us the amazing presentation. This amazing presentation is also give me an insight that pandemics can also change the political policy. And also, when we talk about post-colonialism studies from Mr. Luthfi's presentation, I even know now that post-colonialism also bring disease. Not what I have known, that post-colonialism is also just give us bring a cultural hegemony, but also they bring us the disease from when we know the Colombian Exchange before, and then not also cultural, but exchange to plans, technology, and how we communicate with each other. And now we have facing the automation era. Okay, thank you. And ladies and gentlemen, now we come to the discussion or question and answer session. Actually, we have about 45 minutes for Q&A session. So please, you encourage as efficient and as possible. I will invite the audience here if there are any question, or maybe you have criticism or anything, you may add some similar context here. Let me check here. There's one. Oh yeah, I have a message for all participants. Please fill in the following attendance. There's attendance list. Fill in the Google form. Please raise hand and switch on your microphone and camera to ask directly to the speaker, or you could via writing in the chat room. And do not forget, introduce yourself and mention who is speak. What is your question? For all the participants, you are welcome to ask.
Yeah, there's a very interesting question on the
yeah,
in the chat room,
Miss
right? Yeah.
Mas Vito. Hello, Mas Luthfi. Maybe Mas Vito want to ask directly. You can come up and say what you want to ask directly, and up your on giving up your video, Mas Vito. Mas Vito said that from international relation major Alvito Nandiva, I want to say that thank you first for the group session and inform that you have been delivered. Sorry, maybe my question is slightly out of topics. No problem. But I want to ask about, is there any possibilities that because of the pandemic in the past, it will occurring the new theories application of some people in the world? Or maybe like, is there any community that focusing or emphasizing about their perspective on the pandemics to the world or to the government? And how did the pandemics could breaking down the barrier of the upper class people from me? And thank you so much. Oh, it's about the class.
Yeah, it's a difficult question, right? These are difficult questions to answer. Well, I would suggest us Vito, especially to read Walter Scheidl's book, The Great Leveler, right? The Great Leveler, which basically argues that pandemics or disease outbreaks happen to be an opportunity for closing gap, not closing, but a decreasing gap between the upper class and the lower class, right? So the pandemic, I mean, there's a lot of examples in that book, but basically the pandemic, could create like a disruption of social system because of huge number of deaths, because huge number of people died. The labor became scarce, right? The labor became scarce. So the salary, the wages can increase. So the pandemic opened up a possibility for the workers, the laborers, to kind of negotiate their wages, and the rich people or the employer, they become less rich. That's the basic argument of the book. I don't know if you think that makes sense. Myself quite I have some concerns with that kind of argument.
yeah.
Right, because on the contrary, what I saw today in my presentation, what I try to explain is that pandemic open up a possibility for for rulers to rule more, right? For empires to expand their territorial, to expand their enterprise, right? Their colonial enterprise, for example. Well, can in the future, because of the pandemics, can we have like a better or a better social justice in the future? We don't know. We can see that right now we are not experiencing that, right? With how for example, Cominfo try to block so many so many websites that have been actually play a very important role in so many people's lives, right? Economically, people are trying to kind of survive the pandemic with being working for companies in other place of the globe mediated by digital technologies, right? So we have this kind of problem of having digital technology as the solution for us to kind of have a better well-being, but we also have a problem in how the state, for example, governing the digital transformation itself. So we have this kind of battle, and if the question is, do we will have a better social justice in the future helped by social digital transformation? We don't know. I don't know, but I have concern with the I tend to see more pessimistically. And this is important because we need to be very cautious, right? About what will happen in the future, what digital transformation will take shape in the future, and who will shape this, right? Can we shape this, or will we just like for big players who actually have the power to shape this, and we merely as becoming consumers, for example, not having ability to kind of become an agent to shape the digital transformation. I don't know, honestly.
Yeah, yes, because in the next era we have facing the automation era, and then there one question into the chat room. Maybe I want to check the YouTube. Okay, there's one question. How we suppose prepare ourselves to face the challenge, especially in the change in the term of occupation that will be fulfilled by the automation? Oh yeah. How do you see Mas Luthfi with this? It is, I don't
Again,
know.
difficult question, right? Difficult question. So, I mean, if you go, to Google and try to kind of type digital economy, or economy during pandemics, or economy in post-pandemic situation, you will find there are a lot of reports by big big research institutes, big consulting institutions, for example, who suggest us to start to acquire skills related with digital transformation, right? Because the prediction is that in the future, more companies, more employers will demand workers with digital skills. So therefore, I don't know in what we has been developing in your curriculum, for example. What I understand, what I see is that our education ministry, the Ministry of Education, are trying to kind of directed the education to include more materials that has digital education on them, right? And try to kind of develop students to have digital skills or soft skills, right? Because in the future, in the prediction, there will be uncertainty. There will be uncertainty in the job market. Companies will tend to kind of hire part-time workers instead of full-time workers. Contract instead of full-time employers, for example. That's the prediction. So then the suggestion is that students or workers basically have to have digital skills and soft skill, especially communication skills, because with these communication skills, we will be able to kind of compete not only in national job market, but international job market. We can go outside Indonesia, mediated by internet, of course, right, to find jobs, part-time jobs, for example. And these trends are happening right now, right? In so many areas, even in games, right?
Yeah.
Right. So that's the prediction.
E-sport, yeah.
Yeah, e-sport, right? That's the predictions. You should, acquire digital skills, soft skills, especially communication skills. But the problem is that, do we have enough educational facilities and infrastructure to facilitate, Indonesian population, right, to acquire those skills? The facilities are, are quite good in big cities, right? But let's go to to kecamatan or to villages, to sub districts area. Can we easily find that kind of facilities that can really facilitate, the Indonesian youth, the Indonesian young generation, to acquire those kind of skills to prepare themselves to compete in the future? I don't think so. So we have this problem of of gaps of facilities to acquire the skills of the future right now, and we need to address that. Because I mean, I believe people here, students and my lecturers, colleges here, are people who have access to acquire digital skills and other soft skills. But let's think about our neighbors, right? Let's think about the people in the villages, right? Do a village or a kecamatan have enough schools, like high schools even, right? High schools. I don't think so. In my kecamatan, in my sub district, in Cirebon, in my kecamatan, in my sub district, that kecamatan only have junior high school. That is the highest school in my kecamatan. So how can people in my kecamatan be competitive in the future? They will not. They will not be competitive. They will not be able to kind of becoming the profile that can be survive in the future. I don't think so. They will. That's my take on that question.
Okay, thank you. Before we going to the next question, Rahmadini, I want to invite some people here. Maybe here we have Arul Sulaiman from Indonesia, UII Kancana from Malaysia, or maybe do you want to share your thought about the social change? Because of the pandemics, we see a lot of change. We have Pang Tong, Anis Amelia Anggito, Devita or Arsila. We have another name, Akarima from SDU. You can also share your talk that you will share in the ISS, International Student Seminar, in later on. We will waiting for your response, and then I will invite Rahmadini Tiara Putri, who has raised her hand. You want to ask directly? You can, turn on your camera or, please. Yeah.
Hello, Mr. Luthfi. Thank you for the explanations. I have a questions about from the past pandemic until today's pandemic, what are the patterns that make a state success in handling the pandemics? And also I'm wondering about, as you mentioned before, that Spanish flu have created vaccines, that is it commercial or not? Because due to the conditions at that time, they have war at the time. So is it commercials or not? And also maybe I'm wondering about this one. Do historians believe in theory conspiracy about this pandemic happened?
Yeah.
That's, thank you, sir.
Good questions.
Yeah, a lot of good questions. But I don't really get the first question, Ramadini. Can you Can you say it again?
So each period have their own struggle to handle the pandemic. So I want to know about the patterns of a state in a success in handling the pandemics, because that it's already past, right? So they already handled this, and what about the patterns? So maybe we can follow that, or maybe it could be our suggestions for today's pandemic. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Let me think first, okay?
Especially for the conspiration
Well,
one.
it was commercial. I mean, the last question is it was commercial. And the vaccine was invented much later on, in the 40s and 50s, right? I think one of the most important things to understand in this period is that, or to understand the history of vaccines, is that vaccine is a kind of how do you say it? There's a cultural lag between the start of pandemic and the outcomes of the research on the treatment of the disease, right? There's a cultural lag, and it will be long. So when thinking about social change, don't think that social change happen immediately, right? There will be the initial phase of the change, and in my case, in my explanation, is the pandemic, and then there will be gradual changes, or cultural lag between the initial phase and the social change that happen. So if we believe that social change happen in the form of the invention of vaccines, for example, so there's a long gap between the initial phase with the invention of vaccines, like 40 years, right? So when thinking about our current situation, yes, we are experiencing like a drastic social change, but the social change catalyzed by the pandemic probably will take 20, 30, 40 years later on. And that's why I don't know what actually social change that will happen, as catalyzed by the pandemic. And then for the first question about, it was the success, right? The success trend in battling the pandemic. Is that the question, Ramadini?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. There's no successful example, actually. There's no successful example. If we see the history of pandemic, it will always be the example of failure. because pandemic is like natural disasters, right? We cannot really predict what will happen, what kind of pandemic will happen in the future. We can actually try to prevent the pandemic from happening. We know that pandemic or the emerging of new diseases usually occurred after an encounter or new encounter between human and other organism, bats, pigs, birds, for example, because there's an exchange, right, between human and that other organism or species or animals, right? So we can prevent that, yes, but our economy cannot prevent that. Our economy has been expansion, right? Our economy is all about expanding our economic spheres by opening new frontiers, right? We open new forest, we clear forest, right? And then we transform it into, civilization, right? So there's always a really high possibility for human to encounter new diseases. And, there are probably, so many diseases that are not yet, known by human. So we have to expect we have to expect that in the future we will we will have new diseases in the future, because this is like the nature of our economy to open new frontiers for our economy, right? So what is this success trends, the success story trends that we can take from the past? I would suggest we look at the technological innovation and medical innovation trends, right? So if we look at the history of diseases from the 19th century, the century when technological and scientific interventions have been developed very progressively well. So we can take that take that the history of medical research and innovation from that period, to see how certain societies or countries have been actually developing the very strong research to find the cause and the cure of diseases. And then we can try to kind of try to understand or learn what our country have done, right, to fight diseases, what the medical sciences or bacteriology, virology, or other science in Indonesia or in Southeast Asia have been doing to kind of contribute to the fighting diseases. So what I would suggest, if you are interested in seeing the success story from the pandemics, I would suggest you to study the history of medicine, the history of diseases, especially the history of medical research or medical science. That will give you insight to see to analyze what our society, in this case probably Indonesia, right, have done for contributing to that science. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Luthfi Adam. It's such a good questions. I know that we have. I think is there 1, 2. Where is another one? 1 and 2 question here. Mr. Herman and Mr. Arul wants to be first. Mr. Herman or Arul?
Arul can go first, Mas Bambam. It's okay.
Okay. Where is Arul?
I'm here.
Oh. Please.
Okay.
Can
Hello,
ask,
Mr. Luthfi Adam.
Hello.
I'm Arul Sulaiman from International Communication Science Studies. Excuse me, this is my question. In your view, how does a society in a country respond to the problem of the COVID-19 pandemic very well? And are there any tips or a theory that might be relevant to use in an advanced era like today to give them a better understanding of how important it is to maintain health and suppress the development of COVID-19? Yeah, why I'm giving you that question, it's because my experience, many people still believe in things beyond reasons to resist a pandemic, like magic. And yeah, I think actually I'm not had that, but I just relate to the condition of this era. We need the doctor maybe for giving the people have to be health, not like that. Not the magic or like that, actually. Yeah. Thank you. That's my questions.
Thank you. It's a tricky question because Arul asked me about, asking me to give him insight, a theoretical insight, and I don't
Beside
have
the
one.
conspiracy theories, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I don't have one. I'm not a theorist. I'm not even a social scientist. I'm a humanities scholar. I would suggest you to learn about the history of pandemic, right? The history of, well, the history of pandemic, the history of medicine, or one thing that probably we haven't really developed in Indonesia is the historical understanding about pandemics itself, right? So we have pandemics in the past, even in 2003, right? It's SARS pandemic, and we have pandemic, a long pandemic of flu. So we have influenza, around us, but do we really know that influenza used to be causing pandemic, right? So we've been taking, influenza for too casually, because we can just go to a small kiosk or warung, buying some medicine to cure our influenza. That's it. But actually, influenza killed when the Spanish flu emerged. The flu killed more than people more than the World War I itself, right? So more people were killed by the flu than because of the war. So it's actually horrifying, but we're very casual about to the influenza, for example. One thing that I would suggest, or probably you guys are communication students and scholars, probably you will be interested to promote, right, historical understanding about diseases, for example. How can we communicate, or can we transfer the knowledge about diseases, that diseases has history, so many diseases has its own history, and not only the history about diseases, the disease itself, but the history about how human have been coping with that disease, have been trying to kind of find cure and the cause of the disease. So it's a long history, not only about disease, but the history of a society, the history of technological and scientific innovation, and so on. So I would suggest communication students and scholars to also try to kind of promote historical understanding of diseases. I know that in communication there's environmental communication and also science communication. Probably there will be health communication, right? There will be some space in your syllabi or curriculum to put materials related with historical understanding about diseases. I would be happy to help that, develop that kind of materials, of course. But yeah, I don't have theories to be for Arul, but I would suggest us to kind of take historical perspective of disease and medical history, right? Probably as a way us to kind of promote better understanding about how to fight diseases now and in the future.
Oh yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Aro, for the question.
Thank you, Mr. Luthfi. Maybe I will provide understanding with the communities in my village. Thank you very much.
It's also an issue for the communications department. Mr. Herman or Mbak Ida will curriculum or syllabus In the next question, we have two. Yeah, we have two. The two last question. We have Mr. Herman and Mr. Farrell Erfajra. Please, Mr. Herman, you can ask your question here directly. Monggo, Mr. Herman.
Thank you, Mas Pompam, for the opportunity. But if there is, question from our college from Thailand and Malaysia, I think I will pass my opportunity to them. But if it is not yet, I would like to thank you, Dr. Luthfi Adam, for a very insightful presentation. Dr. Luthfi, and I learned from your presentation that actually it's not simply the pandemics that change the community socio-culturally, but it's actually the mobility of the people. And sadly, in the past, it was because of gold, glory, and gospel, right? Colonialism for the lust of the people, for the hunger of power. Yeah. Okay. So mobility. I highlight that mobility of the people changed the world, right? Dr. Luthfi, as you presented in your sharing session previously. So I would like to ask two questions to you. The first one is regarding the the scope of, as we know, everything goes become electronics, right? We have the e-learning and then e-government. It stimulates and it also boosts the use of the technology because of the pandemics. But I also see the possibility and also the trend that people also tend to back to the nature and go back to the local. For example, in Japan, I learned that so many people, they leave the cities and they move in the in the village, in the remote area, because because of the pandemics limit the people to work, and also they want like to have peaceful life. So, and the other thing is because of the limit of the mobility of the people and also the goods products, people like tend to enjoy local things more than something like imported or exported from other places, right? So how do you see this thing? And then the second one, I want to know how important is it? Actually, it's related with your argument previously about the communication fields. The students here who are joining the P2A Ice Cream and International Student Seminar later in University Utara Malaysia and Thailand, they have to produce creative media, Mas Luthfi, and they will take maybe photo story, I mean, they will make a video, maybe could be vlog, could be documentaries, to record, what they see, what they experience. I want to know how important is it to have such kind of documents, visual documents, for the future, reflection of the, like you, historians and also people, scholars, to learn from the past. Okay, I want you to highlight that point. Thank you so much, Dr. Luthfi and Mas Pompom.
It's very important, Mas Herman, for me and other historians. I will be very, very, very happy and very thankful if the students are going to the field, like to record the everyday lives of people during the pandemic in different topics. It will be very, very useful for us historian later in the future to go back to these pandemic times and consult with the documents. But then the question is that what are your frames, right? What are your questions going into the field? Try to kind of portray or document the phenomenon. What are your questions going to the field? Probably, I don't know, what I'm trying to kind of suggest to you today is to to try to be sensitive with changes. So the idea of changes in by for historian is a kind of method, actually. So it's not only like a situation, but it frames us going to the field. It frames us to find evidence and try to consult with text. So what we are searching as historian going to the field is the sense of changes. What has been, what documents or what archival, objects or data that can help us in understanding changes. So when thinking about pandemic and then changes, you have to then ask what kind of changes that you are going to kind of document: social, political, technological, cultural, whatever. I don't know. It really depends on your background, right, and your curiosity. So my suggestion is to kind of well, up to you, right? But as a historian, I always feel that going to the fields with the word change in your mind will be really helpful. So you will then try to compare the three situations, I think, three situations: the pre-existing, and then your prediction in the future. But then you have that you have to have that kind of questions that frame the kind of change that you are going to kind of document. Is this cultural, political, technological? I don't know. There's so many. Your first question is very difficult to answer, but I would I don't know the right answer to this, but I would but I'm also curious about why there's been going back to nature movement, and is it catalyzed by the catalyzed by social restriction first, but then also there's a possibility, there's an opportunity for us to work outside of our workspace, but also helped by the advancement of technology. For example, the internet and the Wi-Fi, the availability of internet throughout the globe, for example, can probably makes us to think or to rethink about workspace. So instead of going to the office, by having internet access to internet, you can try to negotiate to work from other places. Work from Bali, for example, it's one of the trends during the pandemics. I know the government are really worried about the collapse of Bali tourism industry, and then try to kind of promote the work from Bali. But in as a larger trend, probably it has to do with the transformation of the culture of work. Probably workspace will not be seen as fundamental as before, right? Probably, I don't know, will it good for the nature itself? I don't know, because so if there's too many people going back to nature, then nature will not be natural again. That's my worries. So there's always been some contradiction in that kind of movement. But that's an interesting phenomenon, I think. Mas Herman, I don't know the right answer. I will also learn about how you will answer this question, by the way. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mas Luthfi. We probably will borrow your method about the change method. And yeah, some for the last thing that we discussed, I think some people, they just want like simple, like I want to work with Jakarta salary, but I will stay in Jogja with Jogja
Yeah,
spending.
that's a good idea. That's a really good idea. I mean, I like that. Yeah. But you know, staying in Jakarta is not going back to nature, right? It's going
true.
closer to nature, but it's not going back to nature. So but yeah, I mean, going back to nature has been
There's another question, Mas
okay. Yeah,
Luthfi, from
Mas
the
Farel.
YouTube's viewers.
Okay.
Thank
I
you, Mas
posted in
Luthfi.
the
Sure.
yeah. I posted from Albert. He asked, "What are you doing to close the education gap caused by the pandemic, especially for students that did not have a digital technology available?" We have some of it.
Unfortunately, I'm not the Ministry of Education.
Maybe Minister of History.
I'm not the Minister of Education, right? Is that the question?
Yeah. First question is from Albert Christian in the YouTube, and then the last question is from Farel Fajra here. He want to share live and turn on his camera. Where is Farel? Still with us, Farel? Please. Yeah, Farel. Please deliver your questions or discussion or criticism. It's okay. Okay, please, can go on.
Hello, can you hear my voice?
Yes, clearly. Please go on.
Okay, I want to ask Mr. Luthfi, but first let me introduce myself. My name is Farel Fajra, National Informatics Islamic University of, and I want to ask you, before I start, we all know that Indonesia is in the state of, is entering the state of endemic, or if not, already in the state of endemic. And I want to know about your thoughts on, do you think in this future possibility, or do you think will the pandemic increase in the future, or will it stay in the state of endemic for the time being? But or will this pandemic will end, like completely ends, so there will be no COVID-19? By considering the development of technologies provided in our country and the regulations that is provided in Indonesia by our government, but also considering the citizens of Indonesia that is still stubborn about this pandemic, since there's still some people that didn't believe in COVID-19, and there's also people that is still believes in superstitions and like magic, and they think that it could help them prevent on getting COVID-19, and also considering people who are anti-vaccines. Like, thank you.
Thank you. Great
Farel.
question. Yeah, great question. I mean, if we learn from the history of pandemic, the pandemic usually has 3 waves. The first wave, usually the mild one, the second wave, the deadly ones, and then the third wave, also the mild one, and then it will become endemic. I would hope, I hope that we have passed the third wave, the Omicron wave. So we are going into the post-pandemic period. That's my hope. I don't know, right? Again, I'm not the minister of health. But if we learn from the history, that's the kind of the the wave of how, or the trend, the process of how, pandemics became endemics, and then live but side by side with us human being, right? So I would expect that we will have that kind of trend, and then not living without COVID-19, but live with COVID-19 as we have developed our immune system, so the COVID-19 will not as deadly as before, right? So so that's what I hope in coming in the future. So yeah, I think, is that answering your question, Farrell?
I think that's enough.
Yep.
It's
Okay.
an enough answer.
Thank you, Farrell.
Thank you, sir.
So do I have to answer the question from YouTube, Mas Pampam? Or do we still have time? I don't know. Up to you.
Yeah. You can ask it, but briefly.
Oh yeah. I don't know. Closing the gap of education is, yeah. But my opinion is that instead of kind of developing or promoting students or population to kind of transform or acquire digital skills, I would also argue that distributing facilities, educational facilities throughout the country is also, or I would say, is the most important one, right? So we can have really strong, yes, we have to, and we can develop or we can develop or educate young Indonesian to have digital skills, communication skills, or the skills that can make them thrive in the future in the new era, catalyzed by global transformation. But we also have to help the others, and this is, the number are much larger, right? The young generation who have not access to good and proper educational facilities, and it is important to kind of distribute those facilities to kampung, to villages, to kecamatan, to daerah, and what so-called daerah, to close the gap, to kind of decrease the gap. So yeah, as important as pushing people or young generation like you guys to acquire digital skills, also important to provide basic education and basic skill for people throughout Indonesia, right? So we have to kind of close that gap through the distribution of educational facilities. Thank you, Pam, and thank you, UEE, for having me today. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you for Ministry for Education, Mas Luthfi Adam. Thank you for our speaker, Mas Luthfi. I think, ladies and gentlemen, it seems the time for the Q&A session is up. Then we finally come to the end of the discussion. We come to the conclusion or closing remark. So I would like to hear the closing statement from Mr. Adam as the conclusion. Is there any closing remark, Mas Luthfi Adam?
Oh, simply learn history. Learn history for our present and for our future. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you, Mas Luthfi. I want to thank for the brilliant presentation and the Q&A session, and for all the sit and enjoy this discussion. Applause for us. Forgive me for the mistake which I did during this discussion. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. I would like to return the control of this discussion back to the host, Mbak Jiani. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much, Mr. Pam for leading this wonderful discussions. And I can see that a lot of participants are asking a lot of questions regarding to Dr. Luthfi explanations. And thank you so much for Dr. Luthfi for the explanations. It was very informative and very wonderful topic. Okay, so I think that's all for today. So that is the end of our webinar for today. I would like to say thank you once again to the speaker, Dr. Luthfi Adam, and also to the moderator for today, which is Mr. Pampan, to our lecturers from SDU, from UUM, and all of the participants. And see you again on the next international webinar. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam. Thank you, Mas Luthfi.
Thank you,
Thank you.
everyone.
Thank you, Mas
Thank
Terima
you,
kasih
Mas
Pampan.
Luthfi.
semuanya.
Thank you, Mr.
Terima kasih. Mbak Ida, sehat ya.
Thank you, sehat juga.
In Thai, we say sawadi. Oh,
Oh.
what is it?
Sawadika,
To say?
Ajan Om.
Kun kap.
Kap kun kap.
I should learn Thai.
And terima kasih in Malay.
Terima kasih. Sawadika. Bye-bye everyone.
Kapun kap.
Okay, so thank you, Mas Luthfi and Mas Pam and everyone. So Mbak Jenny, for UII students, please stay. And US student staff, we will have some informations regarding to our event, our program to UUM. So again, thank you so much to everyone for joining. So we would like to thank you, friends from SDU and UUM, and also some other partners university. Thank you, guys. I think it's okay for you to leave the Zoom room.
Yes.
After this, we're going to have a discussion for we students regarding the preparations for our trip. Terima kasih.
Terima
Kapun
kasih.
kap.
Kapun
Thank
kap.
you.
Kapun kak. Terima kasih for the SDU student as well. For the UII participant, please to stay. And we also will have our lecturers to gather with us.
Yeah, thank you for joining our buddies from Thailand. We have Pin here and Smile, Pong Tong, and also friends from UUM here. We have Hakim and some other friends.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. Okay. Goodbye, everyone. See you
Goodbye.
next time.
See you in Malaysia and see you in Trang.
Okay.
Bye.
I will coming to
Thank you.
3 or 4 days.
Yeah, 3 or 4 days, counting days, right?
Right. Okay. Goodbye.
Goodbye.
Kok tak remove spotlightnya?
Okay. Arul, Dini, Farel, and everyone, can you contact the others to join for our doa bersama and also last pembekalan? So we're going to have pembekalan. Teman-teman yang mau sholat dulu, if you want to do your prayer, kita mulai jam berapa, Mbak Ida?
12.15.
12.15 ya, oke. Teman-teman silakan yang mau sholat dulu. Nanti jam 12.15 kita mulai untuk pembekalan dan doa bersamanya ya. Nanti insya Allah akan hadir siapa aja, Mbak Ida?
Ada Awardin, the Kaprodi of HI, insya Allah, Sekprodi IP untuk HI, kemudian Kaprodi PLT dari Informatika, kemudian Sekprodi IP untuk Informatika, lecturers from Communication Department, then the staff as well. Yeah. So please to stay, and because we will have doa bersama dan pelepasan P2A and ISS 2022.
Thank you, Kaida. Kaida, the program will be run mixed